Teresa, thank you so much. I hate it when people say nice things like that, because now I want to go home. I just want I know I'm gonna screw it up. And but I feel the same way. I always get a little intimidated because you're such a great communicator, and you always radiate that big smile, and there's hope in that. There's hope in that radiates out your face, and every time, and your razor sharp wit and intelligence just always come through. So I always hope that I can do any kind of a good job when you ask me to do something like this, or when we're together, because I really admire that about you. Thank you. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here with everybody. And isn't that funny? Like, step 11 allows us to just kind of go, if we're doing any kind of practice at all, when things like this happen, we're going, okay, 100, 500, I don't know, here we go. Let the chips fall where they may. That's what we're going to do. And to go with that, when the old timers used to say, play the cards you're dealt. And boy, when I got to Alcoholics Anonymous, I wanted to learn to do that. It just seemed like I needed to, my feelings and my ego and my point of view all needed to be propped up with alcohol always, and I've believed in God since I was a small child. Since as far back as I can remember, I've known that there was this presence, this power that runs in and around and through us. But as I grew up, and I'd get fearful, and I'd take over the management of my own life. I mean, as far as a God went, or a power, it was sort of like, okay, well, you're not coming today. And when alcohol came into my life, I let it. It was the great intervener for me. I didn't understand it was counterfeit, that it was that it was a liar too, because it just seemed to work. It seemed to enable everything it was I wanted to do. It became my spirituality and my growing up muscle, and the thing that made me feel buffered from you, and the thing that made me feel connected to you all at the same time. And so why wouldn't I drink that? And except that it threw me away. A while later, it threw me away, and I held on to its ankle for a couple of years. And that's not how I wanted to be. That's not where I started in my life. I loved God. Oh my God, I love the mystery. I loved even the unknown, even with the fear, I know there was a lot of fear around. I was born into a Southern Baptist home, and my mother loved that religion. And I'm not somebody who thinks religion is a bad thing. I'm an and girl. I think religion is a place where a lot of people with spiritual ideals go to celebrate spirituality, together. And so I'm not against that at all. But I needed to find a message I could hear. And I always like to say that Alcoholics Anonymous, we don't have the market cornered on miracles, but I needed this particular miracle. And I'll just try to go through this quickly so that we can get to the topic today. But it really does have to do with the topic, because I needed to access this power. And once I got rid of the alcohol, now it's self that's blocking me. And that's what these steps do. These steps start to break that sense of self down, so that I can feel and access and live by this power, so I can hear, so I can feel and be awake to it. And back to so I found out when I got to AA what I was, that alcoholism is this allergy of the body and this obsession of the mind. Okay, I know that. Guess what? I can't drink. Okay, I'm surrendered to that. But now what? Now what? Because what's going to keep me away from that first drink? I already know. I've known for a long time. I can't guarantee if I'm going to have 2 or 22, but what's going to be what's going to stop me from starting? And then the second step says, it offers me, boy, that chapter to the agnostics is just huge. And it offers me an out. It says, I don't have to be any more than I am, or know any more than I know, that I could start by being willing to be willing. That as soon as a man can say that he's willing, we can assure him he's on his way. That all I have to do is be willing to open my mind. And by the time I got to AA, I had so many disjointed ideas about what God might be. I had to first stop trying to define or comprehend this power. I had to stop trying to do that. And I didn't even know that's what I was doing for a while. But, and just to give you a little hint, I mean, I chased with a frenetic desperation this power. I was born, like I said, into a Southern Baptist family, and that religion worked very well for my mom, and I just didn't hear it. And I tried being a Catholic for a couple of weeks in the 4th grade. I'm still searching, and I'm about as deep as a mud puddle. If something doesn't work right away, I got to go. So after a couple of weeks, nope, that's not. I wanted magic. And then a friend of my mom's was into satanic worship. And so I started burning black candles and praying to the other guy for a while, just trying to hedge my bets, really. I just really wanted to be on the side that was winning. And so I did that for a couple of years. And then, and I mean, I joke a little bit, but I was sincere. I wanted to find the way. And back then, that's what I heard: you got to find the way. And then I fell upon that television series Kung Fu. And I know some of you are old enough to remember that show, Kung Fu, with David Carradine. Ironically, he played the Buddhist priest named Cain. And that guy walked the Wild West in bare feet. He looked different, and he was real tough, though. Bare feet, nothing but the clothes on his back. He had a little bag on his belt, and I don't know what was in that belt, but he looked pretty peaceful, all the time. And so I'd watch him, and he watched how in his being. And don't we see that? Spirituality is something that's so ineffable. We can't really describe it or define it, but we can see it. We know it when we see it. We see it in people. We see it emanate from people. We see it, we feel it in a moment, and we can't quite describe it. It's very funny tonight when I thought, I take this step constantly. This I live and breathe in the I don't want to say pursuit, because it's not quite that desperate, but it's a part of me. It's where I look. It's what I seek. And yet when the meeting starts, right before the meeting starts, I'm like, okay, what's step 11 again? How do I talk about it? Because it is so ineffable, and it can be very personal too, which is my privilege and my responsibility. And each of us gets this journey. So anyway, so David Carradine, he would walk from town to town, and because he looked different, he'd be met by a whole group of guys, hostile, and they'd come at him, and they'd assault him verbally, and he would stand there, and he'd be so elegant, and pearls of wisdom, just a couple of lines rolled off his tongue, and you'd watch their faces change, and they'd go off to help people. And I thought, oh my God, that's real power. This is real power, right? This is something that you can't just conjure up. And so I'd watch, and then he'd get done there, and he'd keep walking, and he'd walk to another town, and this time he'd be met by a whole other group of guys, hostile again, and this time they'd assault him physically. And when they did that, he kicked their ass, and I wanted what he had. He seemed to me to be the perfect personification of strength and serenity all rolled up into one guy, and I at that point, with all that was going on in my life, I thought, I need some of that. And so that headed me off in kind of that direction. But my drinking, and then I ate a lot of LSD, you guys, because in pursuit of this power. And I had heard that it was a great facilitator. And I had heard about people in India, teachers, very practiced teachers, who ate handfuls of this stuff and nothing happened to them because they were already there. So the one thing that I really learned from that, because I have to tell you that the downside of that was that when I was 15, I had an incident with 22 hits of Orange Barrel that took me a long way away for a little while. And so in the pursuit of accessing this power, for me, I want my feet on the ground. I know how to live in the clouds. I know how to live in that lofty pursuit of the whatever and wherever it is, and in the clouds, and what God might be and what someday might happen. but I really needed a practical program of action that would keep my feet on the ground so that I can stay awake to what's happening in this, because whatever afterlife there might be, which is what I really might have been concerned about, whatever afterlife that is not happening now. What's happening now is my life. And whoever it is I'm running into. So I want to be internally prepared for whatever that is, so that I can live to my full purpose, which is to be of maximum service to God and those about me. Once I've done that inner house cleaning, taken that first inventory, that first big inventory, and gotten a view of my greater defects of character, which are born of fear, and seeing how that operates, and seeing that the antidote to that is this access to this power. And I didn't, I was encouraged to practice steps 10 and 11, even while I was learning the first 9. I was taught to go to pages 84 through 88 and do what it says there, so that I hopefully didn't make a lot of current messes while I was cleaning up the past. And then, because that became my daily working format, if you will. And so, I lived on the street, and I lived up in the mountains in a tent, and I meditated, and the thing, and I'll finish with this. The thing that had to go for me was the alcohol and the drugs, because now the things that I felt like might be my way in were absolutely the things that were blocking me. And then I get here and find out that it's me that's blocking me. And so step 2, there's a promise. There are a couple of promises in the chapter to the agnostics. And one says that the consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. And the other one is that when we drew near, he disclosed himself to us. And my initial way of drawing near was to surrender, take the inventory, take corrective action, and then continue in step 10. I do a better step 11 when I'm doing step 10. I'm awake to, I'm clearer when amends are made, and I don't have that twist in my gut about something that I said or something that I understood wrong from somebody else, any resentment I might have. So that needs to be, I need to have a clear slate as much as possible. And then I do a better step 10 when I'm doing 11. I'm more ready to see and admit when I'm being selfish or self-seeking or dishonest, when I'm in tune with this power that I call God for short. And so in that, I have this practice, and it says here, in essence, that to some extent we've become God conscious. We've begun to develop this vital sixth sense, but we must go further, and that means more action. And I want to refer this to, my sobriety date, September 25th, 1987. And while I am not perfect, I am a lot better than I was when I got here. And my thinking has been, it does exist on a different level. It is better. I'm not crazy, kooky, alcoholic thinking all the time, as people like to say. There has been a steady flow of his spirit and more purpose and good intent and the ability to follow through after all this time. So we're not just like 32 years later doing my first year over by just not drinking and taking some initial steps. This becomes a working part of our mind, and implementing all of the steps in my life is a matter now of much more ease than it was when I was new. Bill Wilson has the quote, there's a quote of him that says, don't make up such a big deal out of working the steps. While they're serious and life-saving, that at the same time, we're not going to do them perfectly. It's more important that we learn to be kind. What's in the way of my loving? What's in the way of my being kind? When in the 12 and 12, he uses the St. Francis prayer as an example. That's not the 11th step prayer. It's an example of what an 11th step prayer, asking only for the knowledge of his will for us and the power to carry it out. If I did these things that I just found out, that prayer was not written by St. Francis anyway. It was written years later, but it encompassed the principles by which St. Francis lived and the things that he chose to do. And so, you know, to make me a channel of thy peace. And every day when I was new, I knew that I couldn't remember this whole prayer. So I would take one line into my life all day and stay awake with that. That where there is wrong, I may bring the spirit of forgiveness. That where there is discord, I may bring harmony. That where there is error, I may bring truth. That where there is doubt, I may bring faith. Where there is despair, I may bring hope. So what am I bringing? And we also hear a lot, I'm sure that everybody's heard this, you know, that we want you to let us love you until you can love yourselves. But really the point of Alcoholics Anonymous and this whole spiritual principle, anonymity and service, is to come here and let us love you until you can love someone else. And that's when I know that the point has, that's when I knew I'd changed, when I wasn't so concerned with my little plans and designs that all of a sudden other people had become creeping into my consciousness, you know, that I was thinking about in a good way, or how I wanted to help, or what can I do for them. It was coming through this practice. And I'm going to talk about my daily practice and how that's changed over time. But but some of the results, I like to get to the promises first, I guess. And when I'm sponsoring somebody, when they're calling me and they're not talking to me so much about their little things and all their fears and stuff, although they may have some, but they're also like, I've got this sponsee that I'm working with, and she or he's got this deal going on, and how can I help them? You know, then I know something's happened. Then I know something substantial is taken on internally. So, you know, for me, step 11, the practice of prayer and meditation, for me, it's a lot of fun. I love it. I love the pursuit. I've been thirsty for this since I was a small child. You know, I've said that already, but now I'm feeling a spiritual thirst with actual spirit instead of alcohol. You know, and that's no longer am I putting my sugar in my gas tank, so to speak. And so it's a lot more effective. Well, it's not perfect, and there's a lot of grace in my life, and maybe even just the fact that I know there's a lot of grace in my life, because I know that the gap between the efforts I make consciously and perfection is wide, and it's filled with a whole lot of grace. It's filled, I know when I've been forgiven. I know when I've gotten off the hook, and I just, you know, and I almost went left, and it said, nope, go, you know, I got pushed right, and thank God, you know. Maybe you can identify with that, but so if I did nothing else but what it says here on these pages, starting at the bottom of 85, although I want to say something about this, I'm going to go back and repeat step 10 on pages 84 and 85, not to be done without, you know, like, don't start your day on 85. I start my day on 84 and 85, but just for the sake of instruction on prayer and meditation, I'm going to go to the bottom of page 85. We shouldn't be shy on this matter of prayer. Better men than we are using it constantly. If it works, if we have the proper attitude and work at it. And so there are some, you know, all through the book, there are promises. I'm going to get this if I'm willing to do a few things. I've got to do some work, and then I get the goods. It's just, you know, that's my deal. And what it does is it sets conditions for these things, these good things to happen. So it tells me exactly what to do when I retire at night, the nightly review, exactly what to do. And then it tells me exactly what to do in the morning, down at the bottom of that page 86. And then it tells me what to do all throughout the day. When I'm when I'm facing indecision, here I ask God for inspiration, intuitive thought or decision. I relax and take it easy. I don't struggle. And then it says, if circumstances warrant, we ask our wives or friends to join us in morning meditation. Doug and I don't really do that. You know, we have prayed together at crucial times when we've needed to make a family decision, something like that. But he and I access this power completely different. We both agree that the prayer of the 11th step is, dear God, please grant me the knowledge of your will for me and the power to carry it out. Help me see your will for me and grant me the power to carry that out. That's the basic prayer. But how he goes about it and how I go about it are two completely different things. And but I started here with this recipe. And if I'm not, and then it goes ahead and it encourages us to go to outside sources, to talk to priests and rabbis and ministers, and to be quick to see where religious people are right, to make use of what they offer. Those people have been doing this for a long, long time. You know, and it doesn't matter. I'm an and person. I've said that already. I go everywhere. I ask all the sources, everything I can. I'm thirsty, and I love to hear the common denominators of that the common message that runs through all of it, which basically comes down to love and service. However they get there may be different, but love and service, thinking of the other guy, compassion, forgiveness. The thing, and so when I hear people in AA saying, well, too bad they don't have what we have, I stop a little bit short, because, you know, those people have been out there doing this a long time, a lot of them, and they are allowed to own property too. I have to remember that we rent from them. So I want to just stay a little bit humble there, you know, before we get carried away with ourselves. But anyway, I needed this particular miracle. I came here under the lash of alcohol. And I need to remember that no matter how good of a message someone might carry in a church or synagogue or temple or whatever it is, that I still can't go out with them after the sermon and have a glass of wine. I come to AA and I remember that. That's what I'm doing here. We take spirituality in Alcoholics Anonymous and we aim it right at alcoholism. And then I can go out there and practice right with the rest of them. Every human being has spirit. And that's how I am like them. We all have spirit. I just need to remember that I will never be so spiritually fit that I can take a drink of alcohol in any form at all, not mouthwash form or food form or cough medicine form, whatever, you know. And so that's the difference. And but my friend Howard, who's now deceased, but I know a lot of you knew, he used to say, wherever you see God pass, mark that spot and go sit in that window again. And so I'm going to talk about, you know, the things that have charmed my heart, that have let me know that that power is in me. It runs through me and for me. And I'm not someone who says God shows up. I think we wake up to what always has been, to what already is. When I was new, my meditation period started, it took about 15 minutes. I had a cigarette, I had a cup of coffee, and I had a little reader. I had these instructions. And again, you know, if you're having a spiritual awakening, that's great. But if you're not and you're a little bumpy, check the recipe. And the recipe's in here, and it's amplified by the 12 and 12, what's in the 12 and 12 on step 11, you know. And I love that Bill keeps, oh my God, I hope that I'm getting at least one complete sentence out here. But we, you know, the big book they wrote, and then 13 or so years later, we got the 12 and 12 with the essay on step 11. And then so that was like 1955 or something when it finally came out. And then 1958, there's an article that Bill wrote for the Grapevine that talks about taking step 11. He did a series on emotional sobriety, and he talks about the greatest gift of all, and then the next frontier, emotional sobriety. And then the next article was called Take Step 11. And then he goes back looking over his progression and lack thereof of the practice of this step. Even though, you know, when I read stories about him and his pursuit and his experiments and his delight in the ineffable, in this power called God, he didn't feel like he ever practiced that enough, step 11. And he sort of ran himself over the coals saying, yeah, I've been talking about taking step 11, telling you guys to do it, and I'm not doing it myself. Anyway, but so when I was new, it started like this for me. I would sit, I'd have my cigarette, I'd have my coffee, I'd have my recipe in the big book, and then I'd have a little read or a couple, actually 2 or 3, with those little one paragraph blurbs, and then a little bit about it. And then I would sit and contemplate that. And then I would take that out into my day. And then one line of the St. Francis prayer. And then try to stay awake and see how I might be of service in my job, and watching the blocks in my attitude, like, that's old saying of, I may not, what is it? Well, at least I'm not how I think. That's, that I could learn to keep my mouth shut and behave differently, because my first instincts, thoughts that sometimes aren't even mine, let them pass. Like, I don't have to say everything that comes out of my mouth, and to learn to be, I don't have to say, let everything come out of my mouth that goes through my brain. And so learning to be quiet and to breathe. And Teresa talked about those pauses. And that is absolutely where, for a moment, maybe I can get an inspiration. And I learned that from a friend named Susan, who used to tell us all to breathe through your nose. When you get excited, breathe through your nose. And what I found out, that when I did that I kept my mouth shut. And so I didn't make any, new messes at the time. But as I went through, like at a couple of years sober, I would do this. And then at a couple of years sober, I stopped smoking cigarettes. And that was another something that just opened me up and made me feel a little bit more vulnerable, I guess. And somebody gave me a membership to a gym. And I know how some of this is going to sound, but it's my experience. And so I'm going to share it. Somebody found out I had stopped smoking, and he gave me a 6-month membership to a gym. Now, I had been athletic when I was a kid, and I lived in the mountains and stuff like that. So I was not a stranger to any of that kind of exercise, but I had never been in a gym before. And so when I went in, I'm trying to stop smoking. I wasn't very healthy. I walked up I was a 3-pack a day smoker. And so I walked up 7 stairs to go to work one day, and I couldn't breathe. I really couldn't breathe. So it was time. And so I went to the gym, and it was actually helped clear out the physical being so that more spirit could come in. I didn't know I was doing that. I thought I was just going to the gym. And what happened was I learned how to do these repetitive exercises that became very meditative for me. Not only that, but I didn't know this at the time until I was in the middle of it, but that it also helps to create serotonin and dopamine and all of those what are they called? Something. There's a word for them. I'm not going to remember them now, but anyway, these elements that are essential for us, that are natural antidepressants, that people like me stopped making a long time ago, through stress and the crazy life we live, and through just the drinking of alcohol and everything else. And so this began to regenerate that. And I began to, after these workouts, I would drive home, and I would burst into tears, and they were just great tears. It was just sort of like a purging. So anyway, that went on for a while, and I learned about that. And for me, I do something for a while. And there's an there are many teachers say this, that some of these things get said over and over and over. They're not, one person may have written it down, but it gets said over and over and over. And that's like, don't fall in love with just one method, and don't make, this is not the treasure, it's the map. And so when something works for a while, and then I seem to get pushed into a new practice or some new tool comes my way. And that's what happened. I continue to do this structure on pages 84 through 88 for me has never run dry for me, but it has often sent me into something additional. And always something physical for me as well. Just somebody like me needs that. When I got here, I wasn't sure that I wasn't one of those people who had grave emotional and mental disorders. And so but it said if I have the capacity to be honest, that maybe my chances weren't impossible. And so I thought, okay, I'm just going to try it all. And so I came upon rollerblading, and I really get how silly this sounds, but I'm doing this, and spiritually it's happening, but physically I needed this channel. And so I would rollerblade, and I would go down to the beach. I worked in Century City, and I would be down at the beach, and I would be skating up and down the coast for miles and miles. And after a while, it would be me and the dolphins, and just this, and rollerblading is very zen. I don't know if you've done it before, but it's, it's like, shh, 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 shh. And when you come up to the curb, you don't argue with the curb. The curb exists. So you lift your foot, shh, 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 dealing with what is. And I would feel so much better when I was done and ready for the world. And then after a while, that ran out too. And I got inspired by watching the dolphins and the surfers. And so I ended up out on a surfboard for a while. And surfing was just a wonderful, beautiful medium for life as far as I was concerned, because it was always moving. And I was always making adjustments in order to keep balance. And, when talking about balance, I know that, in the beginning of our book, it says that if you're seriously alcoholic as we were, there can be no middle of the road solution, and we call these drastic proposals that we're asking everybody to do, surrender and inventory and corrective action, making amends, restitution, all of these things. But all of these drastic proposals have eventually over time brought me to the middle of the road, to some sense of spiritual equilibrium, to where in the morning, the first thing I want to do is go sit on the pillow and talk to God and meet and ask this thing I still can't define or comprehend, this thing from which I come, this expression, this thing that made this expresses me as Carla into the world, where you experience me and I experience you. And so I surfed, or I fell really a lot, and then fell into one more thing, and I ended up ballroom dancing, and at the time I was 17 years sober when I fell into that, and I don't want to give this short shrift either. I had become very stiff and brittle. I had a couple of things go wrong just a couple of bad relationships, and a couple of things go wrong. And I had already started to build up these walls to outside, to people. I thought, I'm just going to do AA, and I'm going to be like a drill sergeant, and I'm going to only read AA material, and I'm just going to do all AA, since I think I messed all that up. I was getting a little bit too, maybe I'm getting too out there or something. And so I did that, and I became very stiff and brittle, and I was treasuring the map over the treasure. And that just doesn't work. Your sponsees don't want to talk to you. They love you, but they don't really want to talk to you. And and I didn't want to be around me. And I didn't really get how fear had gripped me. I had testified against a guy in a rape trial many years before, when I was 5 years sober, and now I had gotten the letter that he was getting out of prison, and I just clamped down. And I blocked out this God, this chance that anything else could go wrong in my life. And I clamped down and took over the management, and I got stiff and brittle. And so what happened was I ended up taking this, because I always am looking for something physical, because that seems to be the doorway into me this way, the way that I experience this power. And I ended up taking this free rumba lesson at an Arthur Murray dance studio. And I know how silly that sounds, but you can't be stiff and brittle and take a rumba lesson. You can't do the rumba and be stiff and brittle. You got to get a wiggle on, and so I'm in the middle of this dance lesson, and the teacher stopped, and he said, "Oh God, Carla," he said, "do not try to dance like a good girl. I don't think they will believe you anyway." And that's a true story. And what it did, I danced for about 6 years, and I got to tell you that I didn't know this. And this is why I know that there's a power, I call God for short. It's how I know, because it answers questions I didn't know needed answering. it got to me, it healed things I didn't understand needed healing. I thought I was doing okay. And because I was willing to settle, and it said, no, there's more, wait, there's more. And so I learned this when you're ballroom dancing, you have to get very close to people. And I had to let walls down, and I had to get softer, and I had to let somebody else lead. And I had to take a different attitude. And just by virtue of that inspiration, I got to do that. And I always like to use this analogy that after a while, that I found God in the now again by just, when I'm not worried about the steps I just took, and I'm not upset about the steps I'm about to take, I'm not fearful, and I just stay in frame and I allow myself to be led. I never know what pattern I'm going to be executing until it's over. And really that's true in my life, and in the meantime, when I let go like that, I get to experience the beautiful, beautiful moment that is the right now, the God, where the God is. Right now, right here, right now. And so whatever stands in the way of that, my worries, my worship of other things, the worldly clamors, all of those need to go on the paper and surrendered, recognized, surrendered, and relinquished. And now I really, I love my meditation time. I like to meditate twice a day, but I hardly ever get to that second formal time. But I do a lot. In the morning, I wake up now between 3:30 and 5, and I sit for 20 to 30 minutes, and I make that time. I make that time to be quiet. I'm not particularly interested in guided meditation or anything. It's just quiet. And sometimes there might be a one-word mantra or something. And mantra means mind protect, which means I either come back to the breath or come back to that one word when my head's wandering off. And most people are afraid of meditation because they start, the first thing we do, we sit down and it sounds like, wah, 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 and or even if it's good stuff, we wander off with that, but it's not wrong. It's just there. We become more awake to what is there. And then I get more attuned to what is mine and what's not. And then I read. And then I just, in the last year, I started, conferencing in. A friend of mine has a conference call that he set up, and he used to do with his sponsor. Now I don't know how many of us there are, but we call in, and then somebody reads something, and we sit again for 20 minutes, just quiet. There's no story or nothing. We just sit, and somehow the consciousness of that is different than sitting alone, and they're both good. And then we're done. And then I go out in the world and see what it is I can bring to it. Not only has meditation enabled me to see where I might be of service, but also it's changed me. I mean, I always laugh and joke that I'm the queen of reinvention. I had a 20-year career in investment banking, and then I left there consciously. And I mean, I've done all kinds of things in getting to where I am today. And now I'm looking at retirement, and I'm an artist. And I didn't even dare say that word before because it just seemed to be so ridiculous. But I make art now, and my husband inspires me, and those of you who know him understand why. He's a terrific artist, and he manifests, and I was just fearful. I never thought of myself as being able to do that, or that I thought it would be selfish. And yeah, I'm going to say that again, what Howard says, what he said, wherever you see God pass, mark that spot and go sit in that window again. Whatever's charming your heart, if it's a particular author or writing or dancing or, it sounds so woo-woo, but it's really not. Find your own. My husband's a wood carver, and he finds his God, and you see it in his work. It's magnificent, and he's known all over the world for that. And now, my stuff may never be like that, but it's what I do. And Mother Teresa used to say, we may not I'm going to paraphrase, but we may not do great things, but we can do small things with great love. And whatever ripples out from me, I want it to be clean and clear and pure. And so the time that I take to, my prayer life is about intention. It's about, may I be peaceful, may I bring, it's like what Saint Francis says, may I bring forgiveness, may I bring healing, may I bring like that. I try not to exact results, like, I know I'm running out of time, so I'll wrap it up, but if somebody's sick, have your will, please have your will, and bring strength and comfort to us all, that we might know what to do in whatever result happens. I really can't say I know that prayer works when we all want to try to conjure up a certain result. I don't know about that, but I know that I sit and I take the time, and it's worth sitting and taking the time to experience this God. And when I'm laying tiles and pieces of glass onto a surface somewhere, I do mosaic work. And when I'm doing that, I feel the presence of God. And in more today than ever, I experience God in what it is I'm doing, because what I am is God installed. I mean, there's nowhere, if God is everything, then there's nowhere I can go where God is not, is there? And so to contemplate that, to try to access that and live in that, is what I do today. And it's worth taking the time to sit on the pillow in the morning. And then one last thing, my sponsor gave me this prayer, and I just love it. It's her sponsor gave it to her, and she says, ask God to grant you the heart of a grateful servant. And I do. And in that prayer is big joy. And but it started by, I think it was Rumi who said that liberation comes when we stop doing all of those things that insult our souls, something like that. And the first few steps of Alcoholics Anonymous taught me how to do that, how to continue to do that in step 10, and then to grow and improve this conscious contact we have, and then to share it in 12. I hope that something in there made some sense. And really, I just want to encourage you to go out and find yours, find what charms and tickles your heart and sparks you, because it's God installed, and we should grow it. Thanks so much for having me.